Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. In today's episode, what do you mean I can't drive my car? My dad told me to just walk home, so I did. Cutting back on overtime in a field where urgent response is the norm, you'll pay for it. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. What do you mean I can't drive my car? I've been a mechanic my entire working life so far, and this is one of my favorite experiences. I had a customer come in complaining about a vibration. I put the vehicle on the lift and checked the front end. I found a nearly broken tie rod and a faulty rack and pinion. So basically, the passenger side front wheel was not fully secured to the steering system and would soon break and cause the wheel to be completely disconnected from the steering. I told the customer how much the repair would be and told her it was unsafe to drive. She asked me to put it back together so she could leave. I told her that I could not do that because if it broke after I let her leave, I could be held liable. She started yelling and screaming about calling the cops and suing me, and how her cousin's brother knows a guy who's related to the chief of police and I'll be arrested. She calls the police and they come out. I show the officers the vehicle and they understood the safety concern. They told me to just put the car down and let her leave. I did, and even made her sign a statement declining crucial safety repairs. She left with the most I told you so smug grin on her face. Until she left the property, got pulled over and her car impounded. They also gave her a ticket for reckless driving. I was so happy seeing her car get towed. Edit for clarification. The cops told her it was against the law to drive it. The state laws back then allowed me to do exactly what I did. I offered to discount the price of the repair and take payments. She still refused. And I don't care how well versed you think you are in the law, you don't know when or where this took place. And no, I won't tell you what state I am in because I have already had several people message me saying they are going to try and find my shop just to harass and blast me. Was it the same cops that told you to release the car waiting just off the property to impound the car? Or was it more coincidence? I was hoping this was the outcome. I guess her cousin's brother's friend's chief can help her get those cops fired for giving her a ticket. Did her car come back to get fixed? No, unfortunately I never got the satisfaction of seeing her so I could say I told you so. But isn't your cousin's brother just your cousin? Calling the cops backfired big time for her. That seems to be a theme when the antagonist calls the cops in these stories. So the same cops had to wait till her car left the premises to impound her vehicle? I imagine that they needed her to be driving the car on a public road before they could charge her with anything and take her car. One of those in-your-face stories. I was working retail and as a store manager was opening a brand new store. In the process of stocking it. One day as I was starting to pull into a parking spot, this car comes around, cuts me off and parks in the spot ahead of me. The girl gets out and laughs at me while giving me the finger. This was a freestanding store, so as there was no other business around, I figured she was heading to my store that wasn't open for business but still in the hiring phase. As we entered the store at the same time, with me a few steps behind her, she asked the first person she saw, "Where is the store manager? I want to apply for a job." The clerk said, "He is standing right behind you." When she turned around and saw it was me, the person she just gave the finger to in the parking lot, all she said was "Oh," and turned around and left the store. It took me several minutes to stop laughing. Interesting that you'd be liable if you didn't do any repairs. Surely it's not your responsibility when the customer makes an informed decision to not go ahead with your advice. I think that may depend on where you live and who you work for. We just used to always make customers sign a statement before leaving if they decided against repairs. That way it protects us from the customer trying to say, "Well, it was just fine before I took it in, they must have broke it," or something along those lines. Was having coffee with a 8 months pregnant woman. She told me her car was across the street getting 2 tie rods fixed. Mechanics told her it was unsafe to drive. Total estimate, $1,200 for 2 tie rods. I told her that was excessive, and she called her husband at work and asked him. Well, he left work to see what the fuss was about. Turns out they were trying to scam this pregnant woman out of $900. Most mechanics eBay dealt with in Chicago or anywhere are crooks. If you find an honest mechanic, stick with them your whole life and tell your friends and family to use them. Her cousin's brother knows a guy. Her cousin's brother is also her cousin. I'm glad the car was impounded though, she totally deserved it. My dad told me to just walk home, so I did. I just remembered this old story of mine earlier today and thought it would be fun to share. I'm not 100% sure that this qualifies as malicious compliance since it wasn't intended to be at the time, but I'll let you readers be the judge. A long time ago, in the faraway year of 1999, I was a young 11-year-old boy finishing my last year elementary school. Right before my birthday, which was in May, my parents called the family together for a meeting. They told us my mom had gotten a new job and we would need to move. We weren't moving too far away, only about an hour, but that still meant moving away from my friends and going to a completely different middle school than the one I thought I'd be going to. Elementary school wrapped up and we moved to our new house in early July. In August, my parents and I got to take a tour of the school and meet the principal and some of the teachers. That was when we learned that there weren't any buses that passed our new neighborhood. It was actually close to the school, so that meant I would be walking to and from there every day. My parents weren't too thrilled about this, but it was only 15 to 20 minute walk and there was a path, so they came around on the idea pretty quickly. At the time, both of my parents worked full-time and 5 days a week. My mom worked Monday through Friday and my dad worked Monday through Thursday and Saturday. Trust me, this is relevant. Since my older sister was away in college full-time and they didn't trust me and my brother alone, my parents found a babysitter to be there when my brother and I would get home and watch us until my parents got home. My brother was 2 years younger than me and in the local elementary school. The school year started and in early September, we got a massive heat wave that reached highs of like 96 degrees for a couple days. The middle school was also an old building and most of it was not air-conditioned. I only had 2 classes that had AC in the classroom throughout the day. At the end of those days, I was tired and not in any mood to walk an additional 20 minutes in the heat before getting home, so I used vending machine snack money to call the babysitter from the payphone. Cell phones were definitely not used by kids in those days. The babysitter, thinking he was just not letting me suffer in the heat, came to pick me up and I would do some homework before Batman Beyond and Pokemon came on. I did try to call home 2 more times over the next 2 weeks when it was hot. The second time I got the sitter again, the third time I called was on a Friday. My dad answered. He was not happy with me. He told me it wasn't that hot, 85 that day, that I shouldn't call the sitter away from the house and that I had to start growing up. He told me to walk home and we would talk more when I got there. So I walked home. I got a lecture and was told to not call the sitter again to be picked up. I said okay and told him I wouldn't call the sitter or him again to be picked up. 2 weeks later, at the end of September, a hurricane passed through the area. Halfway through the day at school it really started coming down. It got so bad that they let us out of school a half hour early, like that was gonna save us. By this time though, a lot of roads were flooding and the line for payphones was long. I remembered what my dad told me a couple weeks ago, so I walked home. It took me almost 30 minutes to walk home from school that day and I was drenched by the time I got home. The rain was coming down so hard I couldn't see more than 5 feet in front of me. The roads were so flooded that the only way to drive in was with a car that had 4WD. When I got home, both my parents, Mom got out of work early due to the storm, were there panicking because they hadn't heard from either the school or me. I just walked in through our garage, soaking wet, and said, "Hi Mom, hi Dad, I'm home." After they got over the initial shock and relief of seeing me home, my parents and I had this conversation. "Mom, how did you get home?" "Me, I walked." Mom, why? Me, Dad told me to. Mom, when? We didn't get any calls from you or the school today. Me, well, a couple weeks ago, I called the sitter a few times and asked for a ride home since it was hot. The last time I called, I got Dad. He told I had to just walk home from now on and not call for a ride again. Dad, I implied that there could be exceptions. Me, you didn't say that. My mom turned on my dad and just told me to dry myself off and put my wet clothes in the dryer. I was drying myself off and I could hear them arguing. It was louder than the rain. When I was done and put my clothes in the dryer, my parents talked to me and told me I was allowed to call home but only for emergencies. The next day, Saturday, my dad took me out to Blockbuster and I was told I could rent up to 5 movies for myself. He also paid for pizza that night and I got a whole pepperoni pizza for myself. That pizza lasted 2 days and no one else was allowed to touch it. My dad never lived that down. Good times. For future parents, never underestimate what trouble the combination of adolescent attitude and the fact that 80% of people under 18 think they're invincible will cause. And never forget what you told them, because they won't, unless it was important. Grade 1. My stepfather once told me I had to walk home after I passed gas in the car one too many times. I showed him, by walking halfway across town back home. When I got there, everyone acted like I was crazy, while I was like, hey, you told me to do it. I would be pissed if anyone made me to get out of car for passing gas. This is some quality MC, sir. And you did mean it at the time, because you followed the letter of what your dad said, not the intent. Of course, at your age, you're only going to fear the wrath of Pa over thinking it's okay to call for a ride in a hurricane. And if you ever have grandchildren and they complain about the bus, you can tell them you used to walk home in a hurricane. Parenting tip: treat every word you say to your kids like it's written in stone. Good luck. I'm wondering why parents didn't drive to the school to get you anyway, since the weather was so bad they left work early. Cutting back on overtime in a field where urgent response is the norm, you'll pay for it. I work in a field where urgent response is the entire purpose. My employer became suddenly budget conscious, which led to them becoming much more stringent about our frequent overtime. We were told that all scheduled overtime had to be approved. Cool, no issue there. However, when it came to unscheduled overtime, which is where the bulk of overtime came from, the problem arose. Any unscheduled overtime would be reviewed after the fact. If it was determined that overtime wasn't justified, we could either be faced being forced to take comp time within the same pay period so that the extra time would be negated, or they would attempt to not pay or claw back money, which is illegal. Cue malicious compliance in 2 ways. I tend to work earlier hours than our main office, so it's not uncommon for me to get phone calls once I've returned home. Normally not a big deal. I handle the call and go about my day. Most times, because it's only a few minutes, I don't even request the overtime pay. This all changed once the policy went into effect. The very first day under the new rules, I received a call from our main office about 10 minutes after I got home. I answered the phone by stating, "Hello, my workday ended 10 minutes ago. Would you like for me to continue this call on overtime, or can this be dealt with to tomorrow?" The response was, "No overtime, this will only take a minute." I ultimately ended the call and dealt with the issue the following day. This occurred about a half dozen times over the span of a few days. I really made my point on this one. I received a phone call after hours that I was needed for an urgent, not emergent, I wouldn't have jeopardized anything to make a point, response. I listened to the details of what was occurring and informed my supervisor that I'd be happy to get on the road just as soon as they'd send me an email stating that an after-hours response was required and overtime for the night was authorized. Nothing crazy, just a sentence or two. The response I got was, "Just get on the road, I'll send you an email later or tomorrow." But I refused. I informed them that I was off duty, and they could either send me the email as requested so I'd be covered, or they could have someone from outside my territory respond in my place, which would have delayed the response over an hour. This back and forth continued for about 3 to 4 minutes until they relented and sent me an email, which I received in about 30 seconds, before I'd even had a chance to use the restroom or grab my keys. My points, along with my coworkers who took similar actions, were made. Our leadership only pressed forward with requiring approval for pre-scheduled overtime, and even that has gone by the wayside. That's a great phone script. I am totally stealing it. Go for it. I didn't want to flat out refuse to take the call, because I do like my job, most days, but wanted a way to convey that we wouldn't stand for what was going on. You were only complying with their rules. They obviously never thought this through or listened to staff. That last sentence should be on the gravestones of so many companies. I'm guessing B. They thought it through, and concluded the money saved would be better and people losing income would be thankful to be employed. Requiring that email was golden. Time off work. I am not sure what is ambiguous about that phrase. What are these people thinking? Time my boss is asleep. I would say I was confused based on his interpretation of the other phrase and call and knock at his door all hours of the night. Only take a minute? You mean tomorrow? Not too long ago, we had standby pay if they need us to cover after hours and minimum 4 hours OT if called. They tried to mitigate the hours with second shift and 10% shift differential, then the shift doesn't start until your first call. As they require authorization to work OT, many of us decided not to authorize to make ourselves available to work OT. Keep your OT and shove it, I'm having a beer and watching the games. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.